Is this thing on? Are we live? I believe so. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Animation Station, your number one sister for anything and everything animation. And as you can see, it is time to finally end off our look through of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And what better way to do it than by ranking every single project in it from worst to best in one giant live stream tier list. Now, as you can already plainly see, there are a couple projects in here that that aren't technically part of the MCU, but the MCU has made them canon. So that means we're not only talking about just the MCU specific stuff. We're also talking about the Sony Spider-Man verse. We're also talking about all the Spider-Man movies, the Fox X-Men movies, the Deadpool trilogy, all of those. So, when you put all of those together, it rounds up to a massive 93 entries. Yes, 93. So, needless to say, this is going to be a very busy video, and we are going to have a lot to talk about. So, you're going to want to sit back and grab some popcorn, and this is your warning right now. This big tier list, I will be going into spoilers for each one. So, if you have not seen them yet, do not watch this, because that's not what this is for. This is for me giving my full, in-depth thoughts on every single entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, up to Thunderbolts, and seeing how they all stack up against each other, and then at the end, giving you one giant final ranking. So, how this is going to work is that we're going to start by just going through the MCU as we usually do. And then once we start getting into the stuff that connects with the pre-MCU stuff, then we will review the pre-MCU stuff first. And we'll go on from there, etc., etc. So, yep, 93 entries. This is going to be a pretty long list, and there's going to be a lot to discuss. So, just sit back, grab some popcorn, grab a drink, and prepare yourself for probably one of, if not the longest video you will ever see me do in this entire channel's history. So, without further ado or delay, let us begin. I also have an extra document up here that shows the scores of every single entry here, just in case I forget. So, without, sorry, voice. So, now, no more delay. We have a lot to talk about, and it is already past 10:30 at night, so this will probably take until at least 2 in the morning, so just sit back, relax, and enjoy. So first, let's go over our tier names here. First up, at the top tier, we have Excelsior, which, of course, is the famous saying of Stan Lee, and it's the best way to honor the best of the best, the movies that continue to stand out even today as absolute masterpieces of both film and comic book film. Then you have Marvelous. These are the great movies that are almost up here, but just not quite for one or two reasons. Then you have Assembled. This is where you're going to have all your good movies that aren't quite on the great, but they're still really good and still worthwhile. Then you have your watchable entries. This is where you're going to have your, well, this is where I'm going to have the ones that I consider okay. Then Brain Rot. I kind of came up with that one at last minute. For the bad movies. And then finally, of course, the Animation Station staple of these tier lists, the Shadow Realm. And yes, I know it's a Yu-Gi-Oh reference, but it's kind of just stuck with me ever since. This is where we're going to put the worst of the worst. The stuff that gets like a 2 out of 10 or below will be down here. And then this will be like 3 and 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. So, yep, there is a lot to do, and there is a lot to talk about. So, let us now begin our final tier list of the Marvel Cinematic Universe up to Thunderbolts. First up is Iron Man. And it's still crazy to me that this movie is still so incredibly rock solid all by itself. even despite being the kickoff of this giant universe. Iron Man is a movie that had a lot riding on it. You had an actor that was scraping for roles, you had comic book movies not being taken very seriously, because even though this came out the same year as The Dark Knight, it still wasn't up to that par yet. And of course, I mean, it's a Marvel movie, and the Marvel movies up to this point had been very hit or miss, which we'll talk about when we get to the actual pre MCU, post MCU extra stuff. So, but the first Iron Man is still a great movie. Like, that has not changed, and that's not going to change. Do I want to put it in Excelsior? Uh, yeah, this is the weird part. I'm not sure where to put it because it's a 9.5 out of 10. It is an excellent movie. I still love the hell out of it. It is still extremely rewatchable. Um, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna put it in Excelsior right away. Yeah, I know it feels a little weird to put like one of the first movies, well, the first movie in this entire universe on the top tier. But trust me when I say it deserves it. From the incredible acting of Robert Downey Jr. to the amazing way it adapted the uh, origin story from the comics to all the cool effects that were way ahead of their time, the soundtrack, the goofy dialogue. It's just a great movie, dude. Like, the first Iron Man stands the test of time even now. So, yeah, awesome movie. And I also, even though I'm not a big fan of Obadiah Stane as a villain, I do love Jeff Bridges' performance, and I do like the Ironmonger fight. So, pretty cool. Not to mention it ends with something that none of these movies had done previously, and that is a superhero announcing their secret identity to the world. Something that for some reason they wouldn't do for many more years. But yeah, the first Iron Man, excellent film. It will always be an excellent film, and it will never stop being an excellent film. In Excelsior it goes, without a doubt. It may not be like the greatest movie in the whole MCU, but it belongs up there. Okay, now moving on to the next entry in Phase 1 of the MCU, which is the redhead stepchild, which is the Incredible Hulk. Many people consider this movie either okay or bad. And for me, I've never really understood that. Now, granted, I don't think it's a great movie, but I am going to put it in assembled. I think this movie is still really, really good. And it's mainly because of Edward Norton playing such a great Bruce Banner. And then you have Hulk himself, who has, in my opinion, the best look of Hulk we've gotten in any movie ever. Just the nice amount of grit and texture with that comic bookiness. I love Tim Roth's Abomination, even though as a villain he's kind of meh. And the action in this movie is absolutely insane. Like, people really don't like this movie, and it's a shame because I personally think that this is a criminally underrated gem. Really enjoy Incredible Hulk, and it's a shame that it is still the lowest grossing movie in the entire MCU. Yes, even considering some of the box office flops of Phases 4 and 5, that is sad. Then moving on next was Iron Man 2. And this is the movie where they try to do too much at once when they start realizing that they did have a rock solid foundation to make this universe. So, because of that, they started doing too much at once. They added Black Widow, they added some more stuff about S.H.I.E.L.D., obviously the Rhodey recasting with Don Cheadle instead of Terrence Howard. Um, then you have Whiplash, and you have the whole government thing, and of course you have Tony slowly dying of palladium poisoning and later self-destructing out of, well, just not caring. But it still has great action, it still has amazing music, and it is still watchable. And that's exactly where it belongs. I don't think this movie is nearly as bad as most people say it is. Yes, it does too much at once and it's not a good movie, but it's still entertaining. And that is why I think it deserves to be in watchable. It is a perfectly watchable movie. I believe I gave it, what, 5.5 out of 10? Yes, 5.5, right there. 5.5 out of 10 for that one. Then moving on from Iron Man 2 was the first Thor. Now, this is a movie that I said in my reviews that I have had very complicated thoughts on, and even now that still remains true. Well, it did remain true until recently. As a kid, I hated it. I thought it was boring, I thought it was tedious, and I thought it was way, way below what the other movies had done previously. Then, as a teenager, I watched it again, and I thought it was just okay. I came around to liking the action more, I started seeing the greatness of the performances from the lead actors, but the Earth stuff was still just super boring. So, now that I am a full grown adult, and I have seen this movie a third time with a completely fresh and new perspective, yeah, I think that's the perfect spot to put it. I don't think it belongs in like the top tier of the greatest movies in the entire MCU, but damn. The first Thor movie is a really great film. I love Asgard, I love Thor's whole origin, Tom Hiddleston's Loki, arguably the best villain in the whole MCU. Then you have Anthony Hopkins, yes, Hannibal Lecter himself as Odin, who gives a great amount of presence. Then, of course, you have Knuckles himself, Idris Elba as Heimdall. But the Earth stuff is still boring. Like that part, I'm not even gonna try to look past that. That part is boring. But the rest of this movie is fantastic, and it shocked me how much I ended up loving it on this rewatch. So, yeah, love the first Thor now. I don't think it's quite Excelsior, but it is a great movie. But do you know what does belong in Excelsior? Captain America the First Avenger. I'm just going to say right now, I have a huge bias towards the Captain America movies. They're the ones that I've rewatched the most besides Spider Man, and they're the ones that have stuck with me the most. First Avenger being no exception. This movie is as perfect of an origin story as you can get. From Chris Evans' incredible performance as Steve Rogers to the amazing, amazing effects, like how they were able to make Chris Evans look like such a skinny asthmatic is a true testament to the amazing effort put into it. Then you have the story and how it also doubles as a war film, and a great war film at that. Like, Captain America is just a great movie, dude. Like, even Red Skull, despite being one of the more mediocre villains, then again, Marvel's always had a villain problem, and you're going to see that very much on this list. It's still a great film. I gave it a 10 for a reason, and it still deserves a 10. I adore this movie, and I will always, always champion it. Even if it's not my favorite in the entire Captain America trilogy, it still deserves to be there. Excellent film. And of course, no excellent movie talk of Phase 1 is complete without, of course, the first Avengers. Oh, the first Avengers. Where am I going to put you once I find you in this mess? Avengers, Avengers. Ah, here you are, right next to your brethren. Avengers is also an amazing movie. I think Captain America has the better story, but I think Avengers is better on terms of pure rewatchability. This movie is so action packed, so funny, and so iconic to film itself that it goes beyond just being a movie. It goes to the point of being an experience. It took something that should not have worked, having all these movies build up to this one big event, and yet it turned it into a win thanks to everyone involved. And of course, this was before Joss Whedon became a hack, so of course, this is when he was still really, really good. Then you have the comedy, one of the funniest movies in the MCU, and that final battle in New York, still to this day, is an incredible achievement of effects and action. And of course, having Loki again as the main antagonist definitely helps. So yeah, it's going in Excelsior. It deserves to be in Excelsior. It is a strong ending to Phase 1 of the MCU. And honestly, Phase 1 of the MCU itself is a really strong first foundation to build upon for this universe. Okay, so with all that done, let's move on now to Phase 2, and this is where we start getting some of the extra stuff. But before we do that, let's talk about Iron Man 3. This is a movie that I've also had some complicated thoughts on. For one, I still hate the Mandarin thing. I think this movie, just throwing the Mandarin in there and having him be a threat, then just turned out to be some random actor in a chair, that was annoying. And of course, it's the third movie in a row to have the douchebag in a suit cliche, that being Aldrich Killian, who is way worse than Hammer and way worse than Obadiah. However, what makes this movie good is its action. It's much darker tone. This was directed by Shane Black, and a really just insane, awesome finale that also gave Tony a really cool send off for his solo movie character arc. So it goes and assembled. I think it's a pretty good movie. I think Incredible Hulk is better, but I do still really like it. So it definitely deserves to be there. Next up is one that I forgot to review, Agent Carter. And I honestly should have reviewed it because this one is also pretty great. It's going to Marvelous. The way that it carries on from the final scenes of her from First Avenger is really cool. Not to mention, it turns out to be a prequel to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which we'll talk about later on. But it's all just really, really well done. So freaking cool. Like, I love this show, dude. Like, it started off as a one shot, and then it turned into a show, and it only got better from there. Speaking of getting better, was it better than there? No, not yet. First, we had to go through one more. And then we have Thor the Dark World. We all know where that's going. Brain rot. Terrible movie. Malekith's a crap villain. Story's crap. Jane is crap. Having Loki die was a bad decision. And the ending and final battle is some of the worst lit cinematography I had ever seen in my life. So yeah, this sucks. This one sucks big time, and it was the first genuinely bad movie in the MCU. However, it was then followed up by one of the best movies in the MCU, that being Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Dude, I adore this movie. Not only is it a great sequel to the first Captain America and Avengers, but it's also a phenomenal spy thriller that just happens to have Captain America and great action. And then, of course, you have Winter Soldier and the whole twist of him being brainwashed Bucky, and the way that S.H.I.E.L.D. was actually birthed from Hydra, and how they used that to try and take down the world is extremely clever and extremely well done. Then you have the great action and the final battle on a bunch of helicarriers. What's there not to like? Winter Soldier still stands tall as one of the best movies in the whole MCU. Then moving on from that was another great movie, and this one a lot of people did not expect much out of, including myself, but it turned out to be a great movie for more reasons than one, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy. This movie's hilarious. Like, on pure comedy alone, it gets this high, but it also has a great story, great characters, amazing acting and voice acting. And even though the villain is terrible, I hate Ronan, he's such a plank of wood, he works well enough to move this plot forward. And the Guardians themselves, like, amazing characters, and there's a reason why this movie has made them into pop culture staples. Especially Chris Pratt as Star-Lord. Like, talk about perfect casting. And then the whole ending with it being an actual introduction of an Infinity Stone, and them using that Infinity Stone to destroy Ronan, that that was cool. Oh, and Groot's death was, yeah, that part made all of us cry. So, yeah, that's the first Guardians. Then moving on from the first Guardians was the second Avengers movie, right? I believe so, because it went, yes, because it went Avengers 2, yes, okay. Next up was Avengers Age of Ultron, and I know that I'm going to get so much crap for this, but I don't care. I honestly do not care. I freaking love Avengers Age of Ultron. I think it is better than the original Avengers in terms of story, writing, characters, and battles. Sure, this one's more rewatchable because it's funnier, but This one, it's great, and I love its darker tone. My only problem with it was that it used Ultron as a one-off villain, which is a bummer because he's one of the most iconic villains in Marvel. But the action is great. I love its darker, grittier tone, and the whole battle in Sokovia, some of the coolest shit I have ever seen. So, yeah, it's not better than Winter Soldier, but it's still a great movie. Speaking of great movies, next we get to talk about, I believe, the first Ant-Man, right? Yes, the first Ant-Man. And the first Ant-Man is going into Marvelous. And I think I'm gonna put it right about. Let me think. It's funnier than Thor, but no, I don't like the story better. It can go right there. This movie rocks. Like, Ant-Man should not have worked, and yet it did work. Not only as a satisfying conclusion to Phase 2 of the MCU, but also just being a hilarious comedy. That's what makes this movie as good as it is, the comedy. It is funny, it is sharp, it is extremely, extremely well written. Yes, Yellow Jacket sucks as a villain, and that's why it can't go up here, but still a great movie, and it deserves to be among the greats. Then, finally, is a weird one with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This was a show that was originally exclusive to ABC, and it is one that both runs adjacent with the MCU, but also kind of deviates from the MCU, especially in its later seasons. And I don't think that's a bad thing, and I think that them making like this spy espionage show was not a bad idea. However, it did stick around just a little too long. The writing at times could be hit or miss, and every now and then you get a scene or a character that you just don't like. However, what makes this show great in my opinion is Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider. That everything surrounding that character was amazing. That was the main reason I wanted to watch the show was for Robbie Reyes, and they did not disappoint. And I love, love, love that they put Ghost Rider in this show. So, with all that said, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to go into Assembled because it's overstated its welcome a little bit. There's one or two many seasons, and every now and then it makes a really dumb decision. But it has some really good moments, some good characters. We get to learn a little bit more about Coulson, and again, Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider. That alone makes the whole thing worth watching. So, it's not like the most amazing thing in the MCU, but for one of the first ever TV shows alongside Agent Carter, before it became a trend, it's pretty good. So, check out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. if you haven't already. I think it's worth a watch. Alright, now we get on to one of the first giant conglomerates, which is Phase 3. And we start off right off the bat with Captain America Civil War. Um, Civil War. This movie is amazing. We all know it's amazing. However, I can't say it's quite better than the first Guardians. And it's because the first Guardians is just so funny. Well, actually, yes, I can because it has a better villain. Civil War is the movie that flipped the entire MCU on its head and literally tore the Avengers apart. Not to mention being the introduction of two mainstays of the MCU, those being Chadwick Boseman's iconic Black Panther and Tom Holland's newest take on our favorite webhead Spider-Man. And the way that both of them work into this movie is seamless. Not to mention that whole ending where we find out that Bucky, while he was brainwashed, killed Tony's mom and dad. Yeah, that led to one of the most tense fights in the entire movie, franchise, whatever. Point is, Civil War is still amazing now as it was back then. And that airport battle, just damn, that set the bar pretty high going forward. Then moving on from that was a bit of an odd one, but however, it was the first one to get Academy recognition. That being Doctor Strange. And this is a movie that, another one like Thor, that I didn't really like when I first watched it. I didn't think it was like terrible or anything like that. It was more so because it was just so weird. But it is still, when I watched it again, I found out that, yeah, this is a pretty good movie. I don't think it's anything great, and it may be just a little overrated, but I am going to put it above Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Doctor Strange is a really good movie, and even though the villain, played by Mads Mikkelsen, unfortunately is not very good, the rest of it is genuinely impressive, and it earned its Oscar win for its special effects. Okay, moving on now. Oh, and the whole Dormammu thing, that, yeah, I still stand by that could have just been left out of the movie and you'd miss nothing. Next up is Guardians Volume 2, and this is a movie that I have had some mixed feelings on. Uh, when I first watched it, I thought it was up here. Then I watched it again, it fell down here. Then I watched it a third time, it ended up here. And now that I have watched it again, this time with another person that is a fan, um, I think it's gonna go right there. I think this movie is decent. It's a fine sequel, but it does have a lot of problems, and the biggest one is ego. Kurt Russell is a great actor, and he played this character pretty much amazingly the whole movie. However, its big problem was that they made Ego into a villain. And it was so forced and so out of nowhere that it just left me just not wanting to continue it at all. Like Ego's a great character, but he sucks as a villain, especially as a twist villain. But then you have the whole thing with Yondu, which is the best part of the movie, which leads all the way up to his sacrifice, where we get to see him have a Ravager's funeral with Sylvester Stallone and all the others showing up to honor him as he's cremated and sent off into space after sacrificing himself to save Quill. Um, Quill realizing his feelings for Gamora, and that whole final battle, especially when he uses his weird powers to turn to Pac-Man. I'll admit that was pretty funny. So, the movie is watchable. It's decent, but I don't think it's anything that great. I am going to put it above Iron Man 2. It can go at the top of watchable. It's almost good. Then, moving on from that, is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I know that a lot of people are not a big fan of the MCU Spider-Man movies, and to an extent, I kind of get it, because it is like Spider-Man having to be teamed up with different heroes and different characters rather than just being able to stand out by himself. However, even despite that, I love this movie. And it's probably biased because I am a huge Spider-Man fan, but I love Homecoming. It's such a simple, down-to-earth movie, just about a kid in high school that just happens to also be a superhero movie. But the thing that really makes this movie for me is his developing relationship with Tony Stark's Iron Man, and of course, one of the best villains in the entire MCU, in Batman himself, Michael Keaton's Vulture. They took one of the lamest characters from the comics and turned him into one of the coolest villains in this entire franchise. I will die on that hill. I love Vulture as a villain, and he really makes a big part of this movie. Then you also have the fact that the movie itself is just really freaking funny, and you have Spider-Man being more quippy, which is more accurate to his comic book counterpart, and then him messing around with the Stark tech is funny, and just it's just a really good Spider-Man movie, dude. I love this one. I personally love the MCU Spider-Man movies, and I appreciate that they took such different swings from the other Spider-Man movies, which we will talk about a lot later in this list. Moving on from Spider-Man Homecoming was Ragnarok. I mean, do I even have to talk about this one very much? It's going right there. Like, dude, I freaking love Thor Ragnarok. Like, not only is it a great third installment in the Thor trilogy, especially after this piece of crap, but it is also arguably the funniest movie in the entire MCU. Like, and what's weird about it is that despite being funny, it also manages to find ways to be endearing and emotionally hard-hitting. Because a lot of dark things do happen in this movie. Like, you have Thor being turned into a gladiator, you have Odin dying, you have Hela ripping Thor's eye out, and then, of course, you have the fall of Asgard, when it's revealed that they were supposed to cause Ragnarok, not stop Ragnarok. Which is pretty cool. This movie's awesome, dude. I will always love Thor Ragnarok. And it, again, confuses me how this turned out to be such a piece of crap when it's from the same person that did this. But we'll talk about it later. Regardless, Thor Ragnarok, awesome freaking movie. I will never get sick of watching it. Ever. Then, after Thor Ragnarok, was Black Panther. This is another movie that, I find just decent, personally. I don't hate this movie by any means, and it's perfectly watchable. If it's on, I'll sit down and I'll watch it, and I won't change the channel. However, my problem with Black Panther is that its story is just not very good, and its CGI is terrible. That whole final battle is just, ugh, makes you want to gouge your eyes out. It is awful. But T'Challa himself is great. His whole origin story thing here is great. But what really makes this movie at least watchable is because of one incredible performance. That being Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger. One of the best villains in the MCU. Period. That's one thing I will completely agree on with the fans. So, this is a movie I respect more than I like, but I don't hate it. It's perfectly watchable. I have no big qualms with it, but I don't really have any big positives about it either outside of Killmonger. But it is still a really entertaining movie, and it does get better every time you watch it. Then following Black Panther was Infinity War. Do I even need to talk about this one very much? I think you all know where this one's gonna go. Like, you all know, right? Now the question is how high? Because it is a 12, but do I like it more than Winter Soldier? I'm honestly gonna say no. And it's by the slimmest of margins. Infinity War is still an amazing movie, dude. What they achieved here was great. How Thanos gets so much development and time in the spotlight, how the Avengers very slowly lose this fight, and how we see so many of them unite for this giant battle unlike anything we've seen before, with the highest stakes in the entire MCU up to this point. And, of course, throwing that cliche happy ending out the window by having half of the heroes in the series get snapped away, pretty much into limbo, including poor old Spidey, which really hits Tony Stark hard. But yeah, Infinity War, it's still amazing now, it was amazing back then, and it will forever be amazing. I think Endgame is better, but that's just my personal taste. Moving on from Infinity War was two pit stops before we got there. Next was Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is a movie that is very bizarre, but it is pretty funny. I do think this movie is still very watchable, and I think it's gonna go. It can go right there. I think it is a little better than Doctor Strange, just because it is funnier. But it is a pretty cool movie. I do like how we get to see Evangeline Lilly finally get to become the Wasp, and even though Ghost is a really terrible villain, the rest of the movie's great, and when this movie's humor does land, it is almost as funny as the original. However, because it's not quite as funny on a whole, and the villain sucks, and it's very, very bizarre, I can't really put it into that great tier. It's still a really good movie, though, and the way that its ending leads into Endgame was flawless. Alright, moving on from Ant-Man and the Wasp is Captain Marvel. The first one that's going in the Shadow Realm. Captain Marvel sucks. I didn't like her in the comics, and I don't like her here. Brie Larson is a terrible actress. The story is terrible. The writing is terrible. The plot is terrible. Literally the only thing that actually makes this movie worthwhile is a young Nick Fury and seeing how he becomes how he becomes. Everything else about it sucks. I will never ever like this movie. It is one of the first telltale signs of the low lows that this MCU will sink into later. So yeah, screw Captain Marvel, it is trash. But what followed after it is the best movie in the entire MCU, that being Avengers Endgame. Yeah, a lot of people have turned on this movie lately because of the whole time travel thing, and to an extent, I get it. However, this movie, when it gets things right, it gets things really right, dude. Like, I freaking adore Endgame. And the way that it ends off the Infinity Saga, not to mention satisfactory conclusion for two of the three mainstay heroes that built this universe in the first place, it was perfect. It was all just so freaking perfect. And watching it now only made it even more obvious. This is the best movie in the MCU, and it will probably never be topped. Ever. Well, maybe aside from one, but in terms of quality, this is the best one. Then, following after that, came the second MCU Spider-Man movie, Far From Home. This is one that a lot of people have very mixed opinions on. Some people think this movie is kind of just okay, and they don't like Mysterio at all. And some people think it's great, but again, they don't like Mysterio. Like, that is the big complaint with this movie with most people, they just don't like Mysterio. However, I am one of those people that actually loves Mysterio. Not to mention because I'm a big fan of Jake Gyllenhaal. He is one of the most underrated, extremely talented actors in all of Hollywood, and I loved seeing him in this movie. It's better than Homecoming, and it is a very, very strong film. I love Far From Home, dude. I love the change in setting. I love Mysterio and his whole twist. I love how Peter is still dealing with the grief over the loss of Tony Stark. And, of course, going on an international road trip with his class that ends up turning into one of the craziest adventures that he's ever been on. All leading up to a crushing defeat at the hands of Mysterio when he starts figuring things out, and the introduction of that awesome red and black suit. Just, that red and black suit's great. And then you have the ending, which flips everything on its head. And then you have the post-credits scene, which perfectly sets up No Way Home. Like, I don't know what there's to complain about, dude. Even talking with Nick Fury is pretty funny, where he's like, "Bitch, please, you've been to space." And not to mention, it still has that great comedy of Homecoming. So, yeah, I love this movie. I will always, forever love this movie, and I will never understand why so many people rate it so low. I really, really enjoy Far From Home. Okay, now we're going to take a brief break from the MCU because this is when we start getting into some of the Sonyverse stuff. Because at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, its second post-credit scene, actually ties in. Well, actually, not that post-credit scene. The post-credit scene in Venom 2 ties into the ending of this that leads into his cameo in No Way Home. So, because of that, we're gonna take a break from the MCU for a second, talk about the Venom movies, and also because I just really want to talk about them. Starting with the first Venom. Yes, this movie is nowhere close to even being accurate to the source material by any means necessary. But I don't care. I think this movie's fun. I have always had a really good time with the first Venom. Sure, it's not like the most amazing thing in the world, but what it is a lot of fun. It is a fun movie, it is an entertaining movie, and on every watch, it just keeps getting better. Not to mention the Eminem song in there. Oh, I love that song so much. Then you have great action until the ending. The ending is a mess, but it's also like a weird throwback to those cheesy pre-MCU movies that I grew up with, and it's because of that I have such a soft spot for it. Not to mention, Tom Hardy is one badass son of a bitch. I love this dude, and He was great as Eddie Brock, and his duality with Venom was also great. So, yeah, I consider this movie a really fun time, and it will only get better every single time I watch it. Yes, it's technically kind of so bad it's good because it has so much ridiculous stuff in it. Not to mention the villain major sucks balls, but the rest of it, I really enjoy this movie. I can never find myself hating it. I didn't hate it when it came out, and I don't hate it now. I think this movie is a great, good old, goofy B movie time. Speaking of B movie time, that's when we get into its sequel, Let There Be Carnage. Um, I did not like this movie when it first came out because I thought it wasted a lot of elements, and it still did to an extent. However, when I re-reviewed this movie for 31 Days of Horror, I came around on it. It is a perfectly watchable, decent movie, and I'm gonna put it right about here. And the biggest reason why is Woody Harrelson. He delivers an amazing performance, and Carnage himself, even though he does have to be neutered because this is still PG-13, I stand by these Venom movies should have been rated R. He's still great, and I love Carnage in the movie and his battle with Venom at the end in that church. Oh, all kinds of badass. But the whole thing with Shriek is stupid. Venom gets a little too big for his britches and gets a little cringe at times, and Eddie is still being Eddie, which is both a pro and a con. But because the action's great, because it has another great Eminem song, and because it's just a fun movie, I'm willing to give it a pass. I think it is more watchable than these two, but it's not quite more watchable than this one because this one's funnier. Then we come to Venom the Last Dance, which is right up there with the first Venom, and is still, and is in my opinion, the best of the three. Yes, its story is a bit confusing and cluttered, but when this movie really locks in around the halfway point, that's when it starts getting real good. Like the whole final battle thing with all the symbiotes coming together against this symbiote slayer thing, awesome. Love it. Love this movie. And it is better than this, even though they're both on the same level. This is the best Venom movie, and it is the best thing that the Sony Spider-Man verse will ever do. Okay, enough about that. Now we can move on to two quick ones that we can just throw right into the turd pile. Morbius, trash. Madam Web, trash. Both of these suck. We all know they suck. I don't need to waste too much time on them. But this sucks because it's wasted potential, and this sucks because it's just so stupid that it makes you feel like you're losing brain cells. So, yeah, screw these movies. Rot in the Shadow Realm. Okay, then with those done, now we move on to Phase 4, and Phase 4 is a giant mess. However, it does have its highlights, and we will talk about them. So, first up is WandaVision. This is a show that started off really, really strong, but then by the end, it kind of just plummeted. And because of that, it's just watchable. It's average. It's fine. The first half of it is great, and then when you get to the second half, everything just quickly falls apart. It was a first. It was a decent first attempt at a Marvel TV show specifically for the MCU for Disney Plus, but rewatching it now, that second half is such a mess that it definitely keeps the show from being even good. It's close though. But hey, it's better than this. That's going, even though it's technically a 4, I'm throwing it in brain rot. I do not like Falcon and Winter Soldier, at all. And what sucks is that it's the one that had the most potential, because you have these two trying to move on after Cap decided to stay back in time with Peggy Carter at the end of Endgame. So one of them has to carry on the mantle, and it ends up being Falcon. And Falcon's not a bad Captain America. It's just the problem that he's given really, really bad writing to work with, and I especially hate how it made these two hate each other. And then you have the whole John Walker thing, which is the best thing this show had going for it. And even then, it's marred by that terrible writing. So, yeah, it's going in brain rot. I think it is worse than Dark World because it's the most disappointing. So, trash, moving on. Then we had Black Widow. This movie is also trash, and it, I don't even want to talk about it, bro. Like, I said in my review, it's one of those movies that just makes you feel sad talking about it, and it's no exception here. This movie, ugh, is so hard to watch, dude. It is so freaking hard to watch because it's Scarlett Johansson's last time as Black Widow, and not to mention giving Widow a movie after her death in Endgame just felt like it was out of corporate obligation. I mean, sure, it has two great additions to the MCU with Yelena, which we'll talk more about when we review Thunderbolts later, and of course Red Guardian, played by the awesome David Harbour. But Taskmaster sucks massive balls. The story is terrible, and the writing is some of the worst in the whole MCU. It's just a massive slap in the face to everything that Scarlett Johansson did for the MCU, and Disney should be ashamed of themselves. Alright, then moving on from that was What If? This is one that I did not review, and it's simply because I don't have a whole lot to say about it. But if you want to know my thoughts on it, I think that it is terrible. It's better than the Sony Spider-Man stuff, but not by a whole lot. I mean, think about it. You have an animated show that is taking the premise of those cool, like, what-if scenario comics from back in the day, where they play around with, like, different uh, scenarios of how things could have gone differently. But honestly, so much of it, they picked the most boring ones to adapt. Like, the only time I could say that What If was worth watching was the Zombies episode. And even then, it's going to end up becoming irrelevant because we're getting a whole zombie show that's going to be R-rated. Can't freaking wait for that. It's coming out in October. I'm so freaking excited. But outside of that, it's a mess. And then Season 3 is just an absolute disaster on every single way, shape, and form. So, Season 1's here, Season 2 is here, and Season 3 is Dumpster Fire. So I'm just going to throw it in Dumpster Fire just to make it easier on myself. So, yeah, What If is garbage, and it sucks because it's one of the uh, MCU animated things, and you know I love animation. So if you can get me not to like an animated project that you did, you bolstered it. But it doesn't get much better because next is Shang-Chi, and I do love that half the movie's in Mandarin. I do love how it is very respectful of the Chinese culture, and I do think that Simu Liu is a really cool main actor that does suit being a main lead. However, Aquafina is extremely annoying. The rest of the movie is a bit of a cluttered mess, and the CGI is laughably bad. So, it is better than some of these other things. It's better than WandaVision, but it's still not all that great. I'll put it in watchable. Some people really like this one. If you do, more power to you. It's just not for me. Though I will say, I love the hand-to-hand combat. The fights in this movie are the best part of the movie. Next is Eternals. I don't need to talk about much with this one. It still remains, in my opinion, the worst movie in the entire MCU. But it is not worse than Madam Web. Madam Web is still like the worst Marvel-related thing I've ever watched in my life. But Eternals is the worst thing to come out of the MCU by itself. It has a giant cast, it has an interesting premise, but then it just turns out to be a generic knockoff of Justice League. And everyone delivers performances so bad that it's obvious that they were all doing it for a paycheck. Like, if it weren't for the Train to Busan guy actually being the one guy who's actually trying here, this would be a 0. But because he's decent, he saves it from being outright bottom, but it is the worst thing in the MCU, bar none. It is terrible. Then moving on from Eternals was Hawkeye. And I said it in my review that it's weird that it takes place during Christmas. but then I realized that it actually takes place around the same time as Spider-Man No Way Home, so it made it make a little bit more sense in context. But what I can say is that I really, really liked Hawkeye. I'm actually going to put it right here. Hawkeye is a fun show. It's a show that doesn't take itself too seriously, and it has some really funny moments. I think Kate Bishop is a really cool secondary character, and I do love how it continues and, in a way, also concludes Clint's story as well. Then the action is pretty good, and this show is also really funny. Like, I love the quirky, snarky dialogue. However, it does end on a pretty underwhelming note, so I can't really put it super high, but what I can do is still call it really, really good. So, if you haven't seen Hawkeye, check it out. I think it's worth watching. Okay, now we get to detour from the MCU again, because now we're going to talk about all the Spider Man movies. So, let's go ahead and fly through these nice and quick, because I already did a dedicated tier list for these. So, this is just more reaffirming my thoughts. The first Spider Man, awesome movie. I will never, ever get sick of the first Spider Man. Not only because it was a landmark movie in getting comic book movies to the popularity that they're at now, but also because of how amazing and unique it still is, even today. Tobey Maguire is still the best Spider-Man, Kirsten Dunst is a great Mary Jane, James Franco is an excellent Harry Osborn, and of course, Willem Dafoe is the definitive Green Goblin. Not to mention you have it being directed by Sam Raimi, who made Evil Dead, and he brings that same goofy but slightly darker edge material to this movie. And yes, the CGI is bad, but if you can get past that, you're in for a really good movie that still holds up even today. I still consider this movie fantastic. But do you know what else is fantastic? Spider-Man 2. A movie that I did not like much when I watched it as a kid, but watching it now, I've come around on it a fair bit. Spider Man 2 is everything that you want in a sequel. It moves the characters forward, it pushes into darker territory, it brings in even more cool characters, aside from Son the Astronaut, that guy is just stupid. And it still continues that same quirky, cheesy humor that this movie did so well. Not to mention, this is the one that did the Spider-Man No More storyline, and it actually did it really well despite being a condensed version of it. And then, of course, you have Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, who is one of the best villains in all of Marvel. And the big final battle on the uh, ship barge is awesome. Not to mention, they let Mary Jane finally figure out that Peter is Spider-Man. About time. And, of course, Harry finds out that Peter is also Spider-Man, and that starts him down his villain path. So, yeah, Spider-Man 2, it's one of the best sequels of all time for a reason, and even now, it is still one of the best movies ever. I love Spider-Man 2. Moving on from that, if my pig can calm down. Moving on from that is Spider-Man 3. Many people want to just throw this right in Shadow Realm and be done with it. But, honestly, no. I'm not going to do that. Yes, this movie has a lot of problems. Yes, I think it should have left Venom out entirely, because I think the whole black costume saga thing is more than substantial by itself. It didn't need Venom. And, New Goblin Harry Osborn kind of sucks. He sucks as a villain, but it's very short-lived until he goes on a bit of a redemption arc, kind of. I don't know, it's weird. Then he gets amnesia, and yeah, this movie is a weird, cluttered mess, but I more blame Sony for that than I blame Sam for that. Not to mention Emo Peter, great for the memes, and even though it didn't lead to what it should have, Black Suit Spider-Man in this movie is bad ass. So, yeah, I still like this movie. Not to mention, Sandman is amazing, and he, once again, continues to show the amazing writing of Sam Raimi, as he's the one thing that they actually got right. And even though Venom being forced in there still sucks, I do think that the ending of this movie still ends on a really interesting, dour note. And we don't really get any closure on it until No Way Home, when uh, Toby talk Toby Spidey talks about it in a passing context. But maybe it's childhood nostalgia. Maybe it's because I love these Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. But I cannot. I don't hate this movie. I will never ever hate Spider-Man 3. I think it goes right up here. It is still a watchable movie. It is still an entertaining movie, and despite its problems, I still really, really enjoy it. I will be alone on an island with that one probably, but I will always love Spider-Man 3. It may not be up here with these two, but it is still far from the worst. Then, following that, we got a weird reboot thing with Amazing Spider-Man, with Andrew Garfield, who originally played Spider-Man on Broadway, getting to play the character on the big screen. And this one kind of following the Dark Knight trend, as this came out, I believe, around the same time as Dark Knight, if not uh, close to it. I think it came out, 2012? Yeah, 2012, and then Dark Knight was 2008. So, it was definitely heavily influenced by Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, but I'm just going to say it right now. Uh, this is one of the most criminally underrated and very, very strong entries in the Spider-Man franchise. The Amazing Spider-Man is a great, darker, unique readaptation of the story that takes that takes the character in a darker direction. Like, if you had to do a dark and edgy Spider-Man, this is the best way you could have done it. Not to mention, this is the first time on screen that we get the quippier Spider-Man that we're used to seeing in the comics. And I don't care what most people say, I think that this is Andrew's best suit. I love the suit he made in this first movie and how unique it is from the Raimi suit. Then you have uh, then you have Reese as Lizard, who's great. Then you have one of the funniest Stan Lee cameos in the library. You have great action, and you have an amazing final act with the New York people helping Spider-Man get to Oscorp to save Gwen Stacy. Oh, and not to mention this, having Gwen Stacy instead of Mary Jane is super refreshing. Even though she wasn't here, but we don't talk about that. She's great in here. Which only makes it more painful when you get to Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it is terrible. Now, granted, than it is better than the Sony Spider-Verse crap. It's better than this. But this is still a terrible movie. Yes, Andrew gets a more finalized suit, I guess you want to say. And it does have some really cool ideas, but man, it screws up so much because it's stuffing in so much, trying to be a launch pad for a cinematic universe. And then it backfired, and then poor Andrew never got to have his third movie, which is an absolute crime. Then you have Jamie Foxx's Electro, who in this movie is fine. He's way better in No Way Home, which we're going to talk about shortly. But then you have Goblin. Ugh, worst Goblin ever. And then you have Gwen Stacy's death, one of the worst versions of it I have seen. Even though Andrew does an amazing job acting that part, and I do like how it again ends on a bittersweet note. But outside of that, the movie, it's just such a cluttered mess, and it does too much at one time, and I blame Sony for it. Because Sony does not know how to handle their own IPs to save their life. Then we come to Spider-Man No Way Home. The movie that is the celebration of everything that you will ever love about Spider-Man. I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for this, but it is going right there. Top 3 over Infinity War. What makes No Way Home such an incredible movie is not only how it is a loving tribute to the life and legacy of Spider-Man, but also how it's able to work as a multiverse story. How you have Peter having had his identity revealed to the world, and he goes to Doctor Strange to try and have it, fixed. But he ends up tampering with the spell, and it ends up sending a bunch of legacy villains into the MCU. Jamie Foxx's Electro, Reese Waters' Lizard, Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman, even though he's just Sand the whole movie, which, yeah, weird choice. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, and Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. And all of them together are really freaking cool. Not to mention, it's also the darkest Spider-Man movie, because this one, we we find out that Aunt May is the Uncle Ben of this universe, as she's killed by Green Goblin, and we see how deeply it affects Peter Parker. And then, of course, you have a fun little side story with Ned realizing that he has some magic in his blood, which ends up bringing in the other two Spider-Men, and this is where we get to see both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire return to their roles as alternate universe Spider-Men. And their interactions with Tom Holland are just gold. Like, oh, I can't stop gushing about this movie, dude. Everything about No Way Home just works. Sure, some people think it is a little too messy, and fair enough, but I think this movie is still as amazing now as it was back then. And it is truly the most amazing Spider-Man movie. Sorry, bad pun, but you get my point. I adore this film, and it is easily the best live-action Spider-Man movie that we have gotten to date, and brand new, what is it? Brand New Day, whatever it was called, the fourth MCU Spider-Man movie that's in development right now. It had some pretty big shoes to fill if it wants to try to top this. Again, probably biased because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, but that is easily top 3. Easy. And easily the best project of Phase 4. Okay, now we're going to take a break and talk about two things that they ended up just throwing into this tier list for whatever reason. The Spider-Verse movies. First up is Into the Spider-Verse. I don't think I even need to try to make an argument with this one. It won an Oscar for a damn good reason. It was a refreshing return to a much more unique Spider-Man, this time being Miles Morales, and his story and the way that he interacts with all these other Spider-Men, including Nicolas freaking Cage as Spider-Man Noir, is amazing. Sure, Kingpin looks bad, and a lot of people think that the whole comic book thing with the bright colors and transitions was a bit hard on the eyes, but once you get around that style, it becomes a masterpiece. Like, this movie, it may not have a masterpiece score, but it's a movie that deserved its Oscar, and I'm so glad that it beat out Disney for it. It is an incredible Spider-Man movie, plain and simple. And then, following up on that was another incredible Spider-Man movie with Across the Spider-Verse. Now, to be fair, I'm going to put it right here, because I think it is around the same par as these. Well, actually, no, I'll put it right. I'll put it here, because I don't think it's better than this, this, or this. Or this. Across the Spider-Verse is an incredible sequel that did everything it needed to amplify all the positives of the original. However, it is a movie that is unfortunately tainted by the legacy of the fact that Sony overworked their uh, animation team into borderline illegal uh, time crunch over 4 whole years. Like, that is unforgivable. That is something that is going to stain a movie forever, as great as it is. And this movie is great, and the way that it shows how Miles is really, truly his own Spider-Man is really cool. But the biggest thing that made this movie awesome, in my opinion, is 2099. One of the coolest freaking villains I have seen in a Marvel movie in a while. So, yeah, it's a great sequel, but it just has that one nagging thing that keeps it from being up here. But it is definitely one of the best Spider-Man movies. I'm not even going to try to argue that. Okay, and now we're done with our Spider-Man detour. Now let's get back into the actual MCU, starting with Moon Knight. If you saw my review on this one, you know my thoughts on this one, and that is that it is fantastic. Though, where is it going to go? Honestly, and I'm going to be a bit biased here, it's going to go right there. Moon Knight gets extra points for me for being a horror show. Because if you know me by now, you know that I love horror. And this is like the perfect, perfect usage of horror. Not to mention it's so unique and having this one character with multiple personalities, and Oscar Isaacs, his performance in this show, like, oh, damn, I can't even begin to describe it. Then you have Scarlet Scarab, then you have great action, then you have incredible atmosphere and tone. Like, Moon Knight is the best MCU original show, plain and simple. Then we move on to another great entry into the horror side with Multiverse of Madness. Many people are going to put it here or down here. Me, it is going to go right about. Let me see. I think it's going to go here. Multiverse of Madness is an awesome movie, and it's Sam Raimi being full on Sam Raimi. And letting him just go full balls out and making a horror movie in the MCU was amazing. I love the Illuminati. I love how it expanded Doctor Strange's uh, will to protect the multiverse. And not to mention, this movie's finale is like something you would see in a heavy metal music video with a pissed off evil Scarlet Witch versus a reanimated corpse of Doctor Strange. Like, metal as hell. Metal as hell. Not to mention the gore and kills in this movie are impressive for the PG-13 rating. Like, I love this movie. Go watch my review if you want more context. I love this movie. Then moving on from that is, yeah, we're gonna get into a bit of a bad streak here. Starting with one of those things that I outright refuse to review, and that is Miss Marvel. And that is because it is trash. Miss Marvel's big problem is that it's just cringe. It is absolute, like, non-stop, outright, unforgivable cringe. So much of it has bad dialogue, terrible writing, and Miss Marvel herself gets extremely irritating from time to time. Like, sure, it doesn't start out too bad, but then when you get further and further into the show, it just dives further and further down a well. And then you have a terrible villain again, and you have the forced ending making her into a mutant. No, I will never accept this person as a mutant because it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, Miss Marvel, garbage. Absolute dumpster fire, bottom barrel trash. But you know what's not much better? Thor Love and Blunder. Screw this movie. Screw everything about this movie. Treating everything like a joke, bad. Wasting Christian Bale, bad. Wasting the Mighty Thor storyline, bad. Treating child murder and cancer like a joke, unforgivable. And the only good thing in it is the Guardians, and they're only in it for 15 minutes. Screw this movie. Next is another one that I didn't review, I Am Groot. It's fine. Like, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. It's fine. Well, actually, I think it's actually going to go down here. We're going to go you here, you there. I Am Groot is just a weird, cheesy throwaway show, and it doesn't really have any bearing on the MCU. It's just a bunch of Groots being goofy caricatures of themselves. That's pretty much all it is. And it's not bad per se, but when that's all you get the entire show, it gets very tiring. That's why it's going in brain rot, because it's fine, but it's tiring to sit through. But hey, it's not as bad as She-Hulk, which is the worst thing Marvel has ever made, and I will die on that hill. Screw She-Hulk and its stupid ugly face. It continues to bastardize the Hulk legacy. It ruined Abomination. Uh, She-Hulk herself is a terrible character. The CGI is awful. Megan Thee Stallion and that whole twerking scene is the worst thing I have ever laid my eyes upon. Just get that crap out of here. And the ending doesn't resolve anything. Literally, the only mildly tolerable thing in this piece of crap is Daredevil. That's literally it. Outside of that, it is one of the worst things I have ever seen in my life, and may it forever rot in the deepest, darkest pits of hell. Screw this show. It is unwatchable. Okay, now we can go back to positive because now we're talking about Werewolf by Night. You already know my thoughts on this one because I already talked about how much I love horror. But I'm going to put it right about here. Because I don't think it's better than this, but it is better than this and more rewatchable because it is shorter. Werewolf by Night, to put it simply, is Marvel making their own version of a 40s, 50s Universal Monster B movie. That just happens to have a lot of blood and gore that would make this rated R if it weren't in black and white. Like, I hope one day that they re-release this in color just so we can see how gruesome it truly is, but even then, the black and white is amazing, and the way that it goes to such great lengths to recapture that classic monster movie feel, right up my freaking alley, dude. Like, I literally did my whole review in black and white because it was too fitting for this movie. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna call it a movie. I don't care. Werewolf by Night's amazing. If you're a horror fan, it's a must-watch. Then there's Black Panther 2 Wakanda Forever. I reviewed this one very recently, so I will keep this brief, but it is another amazing piece of film. Like, this thing is amazing. Actually, I'm going to put it there. What makes Wakanda Forever such an incredible movie is the way that it tackles such deep themes of grief, and the way that everyone in the movie, and making the movie for that matter, grieves T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman along with the rest of the general audience. Like, it literally opens on his off-screen death and following funeral. And this movie is very heavy through a grand majority of it, but I mean that as a positive. And not to mention the way that that clashes against Namor and his whole crusade. Excellent. Then you have Okoye, then you have Ironheart, who is great in this movie, but very much here out of obligation. And then you have a great final battle and one of the most touching, tear-jerking final scenes in any Marvel movie. That's why I love it, that's why I adore it, and that's why it is leagues, leagues better than the first Black Panther. Moving on. Then finally for Phase 4, because they put all the shows that have multiple seasons as just one entry in here, is the Guardians Holiday Special. And this was great. It's simple, but it's great. And what makes it so great is the way that it's able to both capture the holiday while also not specifically being Christmas related. Like, they call it something else, but it's very clearly Christmas, and it's also ridiculously funny. Like, I will never forget um, Drax getting Kevin Bacon and kidnapping him in a box to give as a gift to Peter Quill. That is some funny, funny shit. So, yeah, if you love the Guardians and you love holiday specials, you'll really love this one. And it's only as low as it is because it's only really rewatchable on a holiday. Otherwise, it's kind of just there. Same thing kind of messes with Hawkeye, too, to an extent. Alright, following that, we get now into Phase 5, and this is where we get into our final giant batch. Yes, we are on the home stretch already. I cannot believe it myself. Starting off with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This is a movie that a lot of people really, really don't like. But, in my opinion, as I said in my review, it's fine. I think it's gonna go here. The biggest well, actually, hold on. There we go. Now we have this right. The biggest problem with Quantumania is the fact that everything surrounding Kang has to be booted and kicked out due to the fact that Jonathan Majors got booted and kicked out of the MCU due to false allegations and a bunch of legal BS. So because of that, having Kang in here definitely harms it, which is why I decided to do a re-review of it to see if the movie still stands out on its own. And it kind of does and kind of doesn't at the same time. First of all, screw MODOK. Like, everything around MODOK, screw that, burn in hell. You rot in my nightmares, you're awful. But having an entire movie in the quantum realm is really cool. Scott is still as great of a character as he's always been. And even though it makes no sense for a Kang, let alone a variant of Kang, to lose to Ant-Man of all people, the way that they do it still somewhat cohesive. And I still love Scott's relationship with his daughter Cassie. That does help lift the film up. Not to mention, even though this movie CGI is terrible, it still tries to do some fascinating things with the quantum realm. So, yeah, not a good movie, but I can't get the same Titanic hate for it that many others do. Then moving on from that is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And this is the best Guardians movie. Like, I don't think anyone's even going to try to debate that fact. This is the best Guardians movie, and it's going to go right there. Guardians 3 is almost as perfect of a finale as you could possibly hope for. Like, everything about this movie is great. The High Inquisitor is an amazing villain. It's the first F-bomb in the MCU. It still has that same goofy humor that made this great, but this has a better villain. And the way that everything ends and concludes for the Guardians is just, it's touching, it's beautiful, and in my opinion, just outright perfect. If it weren't for some pacing issues, I would definitely put this higher, but as it is still an amazing movie, and it is the best way that the Guardians could have gone out. Moving on from that is Secret Invasion. Screw this show, it's a boring piece of trash. However, I think I gave it, what, a 2, I believe, so that puts it right here, but this is still trash. This thing is still trash. It took what could have been a really cool idea about a spy espionage show, with Nick Fury finding out about a bunch of Skrulls hiding in the mix, and that could have led to something really cool. Problem is, the show did not focus on it enough, and instead just kept dumping exposition out the ass. And because of that, it becomes very, very hard to watch. And thus, it is a terrible show that belongs in the Shadow Realm. Trash. And it's one of the things I outright refused to review because I didn't want to. Now, Loki. This is one that is a little bit weird to talk about because we have to talk about both seasons together. If we're talking about just the first season of Loki, it would be like about here. The first season of Loki is really, really good. And then if we're talking about just season 2 of Loki, it would probably go like about, probably like here. Because the second season of Loki is fantastic. But since we have to do both of them together, and I have to take into account that season 2 is better than season 1, and I gave it an all-around verdict of an 8, that's going to put it right about here. Loki is a really good show. The TVA, um, the whole thing with Sylvie, and the way it introduces Kang, even though now it's pretty much non-existent and completely pointless. Then season 2, you have Loki pretty much becoming a god and trying to save the timeline, and ending on him possibly sacrificing himself to blow up this timeline that's fringing. Not to mention the action is still great, and it has some truly excellent writing. Like, some of the best in the show. Like, both seasons have their flaws, but as a whole, it's a great show, and it belongs in the Marvelous tier. You know what doesn't? Marvel's cringe, boring, awful, trash, takes everything that made both Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel absolutely horrible, and somehow made it worse. Well, okay, I don't. I think Eternals is more boring, but this is still absolute dumpster fire trash. Okay, Love and Blunder is more disappointing, but this is still crap. Like, everything about this is crap. Story's crap, writing's crap, acting's crap, characters are crap, villain's crap, action's crap, effects are crap, everything about this movie's crap. It can rot in Shadow Realm as absolute abomination from hell. Moving on from that turd is another turd. Echo. Apparently, a lot of people like this show, and I don't really get why. I think this show is super boring. Like, outside of Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin and one awesome scene of Charlie Cox's Daredevil, that's it. That's all you get. Oh, and speaking of Charlie Cox's Daredevil, I loved him in No Way Home, too. I forgot to mention that. Sorry. But outside of that, this show is really freaking boring. And for the first R-rated entry into the MCU proper, ugh, it just drags its feet and feels completely pointless in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah. Echo sucks. Even with Deadpool and Kingpin, this thing sucks. Alright, now it's time to dive into our final gigantic marathon here with the Fox Marvelverse, because there are a lot of these. However, we still have one little thing to talk about before then, even though somehow it's actually owned by Fox and Disney now. The Blade trilogy. And this is one of those landmark comic book movies that help get the attention that it gets now. The first Blade is as badass as an R-rated comic book movie as you can get. Like, it's gonna go right about... It's going here. Like, I freaking adore the first Blade. Everything about it is great. Wesley Snipes, perfect choice for the character. Chris Christopherson as Whistler, awesome. Deacon Frost, the perfect amount of a cheesy, goofy villain. And the gore and blood, so, so satisfying. Why are we live this late? Well, because I want to get this done now, kitty. So, that's why we're doing this late at night. But yeah, this movie, oh, I love the first Blade so much. Like, ever since I first saw it when I was around 16 or 17 years old, I loved it. Like, I love this freaking movie. And I still stand by that as one of the best comic book movies ever made. I love the first Blade. Then we get on to Blade 2. Many people think that this movie is better than the first, and I don't agree, but I do think it is a great movie. However, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's gonna go right about here, around the bottom of the 9 out of 10s. Blade 2 is still a really good sequel, and Guillermo del Toro brings such an sense of unique style to it, even with the dated, terrible CGI. But a lot of this movie just works. I love Drago as a villain. I love the whole uh, super vampire thing and how Blade has to team up with other vampires only to find out that he was getting backstabbed the whole time. And not to mention, this is one of the first movie appearances of uh, Daryl Dixon himself. What the heck was the actor's name? I'm blanking now for some reason. What the heck was his name? Sorry, I'm trying to remember his name. I had the name Norman Reedus. There it is. Thank you. Yeah, this is one of the first appearances of Norman Reedus before he became big with The Walking Dead. So that's also a really cool fun fact for you. But yeah, I still love Blade 2. I still think it does a lot of the things that it needed to do to be a great sequel to the first, but it's just not quite better than the first because I think that the first one had a better villain and a better story. Just my personal opinion. And I mean, this has the some motherfuckers are always trying to escape a pill line. That alone puts it higher than the second. Then we get to the third movie. Many people call this movie trash, and I am not going to lie to you. I did as well at one point. But watching it again, a lot like with uh, Spider-Man 3, I've softened on it a little. I think the movie is nothing more than decent, so it is just going to go down to watchable. But I don't think it's honestly that bad. Like, yeah, it has a lot of stupid things in it. It has Ryan Reynolds pre-Deadpool being bad. You have Triple H in here for marketing. And of course, the biggest letdown of all, Dracula. Seriously, how can you screw up Dracula? It should not be that hard. Not to mention the ending being weird and confusing, the effects still being, well, bad. Better, but bad. And the story being a cluttered mess. But, however, this movie just has some fun, cheesy, goofy, stupid ass popcorn entertainment value. So, because of that, I am going to put it around the. I'm putting it right here. Because I do watch it more than I watch Black Panther, but I I'm not going to defend it. This movie is bad, but it's to the point of being kind of so bad it's good. I have a soft spot for it, and it's not the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It's not this. Okay, now with that done, now I think all we have left is what? Oh wait, no, not yet. Next up, now we dive into the Fox stuff, starting with the Fantastic Four. This stuff is gonna be bottom heavy as all hell, but I think that this is how it's going to overall um, go. So, let's go through it one by one. First up, the original one released in, I believe, 2004. Funny. Really funny coincidence. Um, it's not a good movie. I'm not going to try to defend this movie by any means necessary. But what I can say is that it does have some nostalgia for me. I do like Michael Chiklis as the Thing. I think he's the best thing that we've gotten so far. Chris Evans surprisingly works really good as a douchey Human Torch. I loved Reed Richards. I think they did a great job casting there. And I think they had all the right pieces to make it a good movie. Unfortunately, though, that's where the writing lets it down, and we get some really weird, dumbass new freaking uh, origin for Doctor Doom that makes no sense. But damn it, is it entertaining? It is pretty much right up there with Blade Trinity. It's a movie I have a soft spot for. I know it's stupid, but I have a soft spot. I'm not gonna defend it, but I'm not gonna call it the worst thing ever. However, I'm not going to defend the other two at all, because Rise of the Silver Surfer and Fant Four Stick are both pieces of trash. No, I'm not calling this what it actually wants me to call it, because this is an abomination that deserves to rot in hell. So, here's how it's going to go. We're going to put Rise of the Silver Surfer right about here. Rise of the Silver Surfer's garbage. Even with Lawrence Fishburne as Silver Surfer, which was a great casting choice, everything else about this movie sucks, and everything about it is far inferior to what the first did. And then Fant Four Stick is one of the worst things I have ever watched. It's going right there. It's worse than Eternals, but not worse than Madam Web or She-Hulk. Fant Four Stick's biggest problem is the fact that it was made out of no other reason than corporate greed. It is a giant pile of crap. Even now, all these years later, I think actually 10 years later, because I think this came out in 2015 if I'm not mistaken, it still sucks hard balls, and honestly I hope that it stays non-canon because I don't want anything from this movie ever coming back in the MCU. It's trash. Okay, now we move on to the next part, which is the weird Daredevil Elektra duology thing. Let's start with Daredevil. Um, a lot of people really don't like this movie, and I can't say I don't understand why. The suit is weird. It's a leather biker jacket thing. That is weird. It is a African American kingpin where he's supposed to be white in the comics, and that's not me being racist. That's me just stating a fact. And its story is an absolute mess. But I love Elektra in this movie. I love the action in this movie. Actually really like this different new version of Daredevil. And Ben Affleck, for the crap material he was given to work with, he really tried to make it into something really cool. Not to mention, this movie has one of the best freaking soundtracks of any Marvel movie ever. I mean, you get two Evanescence songs and 12 Stones. Like, badass, dude. Like, so it's gonna be a little bit out of childhood nostalgia, but I still really like the first Daredevil. Not to mention, Michael Clark Duncan, may he rest in peace. He is an incredible Kingpin. And then, of course, you have Colin Farrell just hamming it up and having fun as Bullseye. So, yeah, I'm gonna get crap for this, but I still like Daredevil. It's not an amazing movie by any means, but I still really like it. It is a staple in my childhood, and if you want to consider it a guilty pleasure, go ahead. I will never, ever raise a finger to defend it, but I will not raise a finger to attack it either. It's a movie that has some nice childhood nostalgia for me, and it is one of those movies that got me into comic book movies. So, yeah, it is technically a bad movie, but it's one of those movies that I just have too much fond memories with to hate. And that's why it's going right there. And then but with Elektra, I have none of that nostalgia because I literally just watched this not that long ago. This thing is so freaking messy that it doesn't even begin to try to comprehend itself. Like, it's going on the bottom of brain rot. Elektra is a bad movie. And it's a bad movie I will not defend because it barely has anything to do with Daredevil whatsoever. The story makes no sense. Having Elektra come back makes no sense considering the fact that, well, she died in Daredevil. And just the whole freaking thing just felt like a blatant cash grab after Daredevil did decent at the box office. I don't know. It's just everything about this movie was a train wreck. Outside of Jennifer Gardner as Elektra, who, for her credit, does try. She's not good, but she tries. But I'd still prefer Daredevil over this any day. But if you can see from this list, there's definitely far worse things you could be watching. All right, now we can move on into the Fox X-Men. And this is where we're going to see the wildest varying scores because a lot of these are good to decent, with some really bad ones and some amazing ones. Especially one of them still being one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. So, let's go through it step by step, starting with the original X-Men. This is a movie that I have some nostalgia for, as I stated at length during my X-Month review, but it's not a great movie. I don't like how it insults the yellow suits of the comics, and some of the choices they make in it are weird, and yeah, more dated 2000s CGI. But I do like the first X-Men, and it is a movie that I do have some nostalgia for, because it was the first time that we got to see Hugh Jackman in his iconic role as Wolverine. And he was just as badass in that movie as he is in every other movie that he's in as Wolverine. Like, even in the worst of these movies, he is still great as Wolverine. Then you have Magneto being a great villain, you have Charles Xavier, you have all this fun, goofy comic book action, this great diplomacy about uh, discrimination and racism, and all ending on a pretty goofy but fun little battle on top of the Statue of Liberty. Like, the first X-Men is as fun of a comic book movie as you can get. It explains everything well. Sure, it's a little too long. Sure, at times it can be a little bit pretentious, but it's not to the point of being cringe. And because of that, I do really enjoy it. Then moving on to X2, which is a slightly better movie. Like, just very, very slightly. The thing with X2 is that it tries to one up some of the things from the original. Like, you have bigger battles, you have a bigger threat and you have more diving into Logan's backstory. And that's all fine and good. And I think the whole battle with Lady Deathstrike is cool. However, what this movie is unfortunately marred by is the fact that its ending sets up the Dark Phoenix saga, the one thing that Marvel cannot adapt to save their life. But I'm not gonna hate X2. It is a good sequel. It is better than the first in many aspects. But at the same time, it also has its fair share of issues. But it's still a fun movie, and if you like the first, you'll dig the second one too. Then there's Last Stand. As if playing Spider-Man 3 in the good tier is not going to get me in hot water already. People hate this movie. People want to put it in Shadow Realm or Brain Rot, and I can't say that I don't understand why. Because, again, like I said, they cannot adapt the Dark Phoenix saga to save their life. But the big final battle is just good fun, and a lot of it is just stupid popcorn entertainment. And because of that, it goes like right there. It's in between Trinity and Fantastic Four. And it's because of the fact that it goes big, it goes super bold, and it tries to end everything on a huge climactic bang. Something that Bryan Singer would unfortunately start doing very repetitiously. But if you take out the stupid Dark Phoenix crap, the rest of the movie is actually pretty interesting with, the whole thing with Archangel and the mutant-human rivalry coming to a head, and the X-Men having to fight a literal army of mutants after Magneto, assembles this giant army to take on the X-Men, and the death of Charles Xavier, which for some reason they end up retconning later for whatever dumb reason. But regardless, I don't think Last Stand is that bad of a movie. It's perfectly watchable. It's not great, it's not awful, it's watchable. Many people consider it a terrible threequel, and yeah, it is worse than the first two movies, but cut it some slack, because I more blame that on studio interference than anything else. So, Last Stand, you're okay with me. You're not great, I'm not going to rewatch you a lot, but when I'm in the mood, you'll suffice. I'll just hit the fast forward through all the Dark Phoenix stuff, because seriously, screw everything with the Dark Phoenix stuff. Worst part of the movie. Then we jump from good to great, because next is X-Men First Class. This was a huge surprise for me. I didn't think it was going to be that good, but it ended up really surprising me. I had a surprisingly really, really good time with this one. In fact, I'm going to put it at the bottom of Marvelous tier. What makes First Class work so well is its characters and its writing. Everything about it feels like it's recapturing that cheesy fun of the first two X-Men movies, while also kind of being an alternative universe origin story for the X-Men. Not to mention, you have James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, two amazing actors playing the younger versions of Xavier and Magneto. And having all of them work together is actually really cool. Then you get to see how the school was built, and you get to see them take on their first big threat. It's a really cool movie, man. I really dig First Class. A lot more than I thought I was going to. But the one thing I dig more than First Class is Days of Future Past, especially if you're watching the extended cut. Days of Future Past is arguably the best X-Men movie. Not the best movie in the entire Fox X-Men verse, but in terms of just the X-Men movies by title, it's one of the better ones. It's going right up there with Blade. Everything that this movie does to tie in both the classic storyline of the original movies with First Class is brilliant. And the way that it actually adapts one of the best storylines in the X-Men comics, amazing. And then you have the deaths, and you have all the twists and turns, you have Logan still being Logan, and it ends on a very satisfactory note. Not to mention you get to see the Sentinels in live action, which was an absolute treat. Just, Days of Future Past is so badass, dude. It's one of, if not the best X-Men movie. which just makes it all the worse when you get to Apocalypse. Now, these four right here, I refused to review in X month. Both because I didn't have the time before Deadpool and Wolverine came out, so I skipped them, but also because they're so atrociously bad that I just did not want to talk about them. So I'm going to make these brief. Apocalypse is brain rot, but better than Elektra. Dark Phoenix is garbage and right down there with Madam Web. And then New Mutants is slightly better, but right there with Secret Invasion. We'll start with Apocalypse first. It has a good idea, and Apocalypse is a classic villain in the X-Men comics. And I do love the scene where we get to see a brief glimpse into Logan breaking out of Weapon X. That was a really cool little cameo. But the rest of the movie is a mess. Even with Michael Fassbender's great acting and James McAvoy continuing to evolve as Xavier, so much of it just really does not work, and so much of it just feels like a rushed hack job. And then Dark Phoenix is one of the worst things I have ever seen in my life. Like, I wish I could just jettison this movie from my brain. It ruined the First Class timeline, and it is the movie that put the nail in the coffin for the Fox X-Men verse. They just had to shite out one last turd before they went. And then New Mutants is also bad, but I give it some credit for trying to go in like a creepy horror direction. But it's just not enough to save it. It's so damn boring. And then X-Men Origins Wolverine is brain rot. It's going to go at the top of brain rot, though, because this is kind of in a so bad it's good way. Yes, I, like everyone else, hate what it did to Deadpool. That was an egregious offense to the character and everything he stood for. And yes, I am also on the side of the fact that the Blob is ruined in this version, just being a guy that overate. That's it. No, like, superpowers or nothing. He's just big. Woohoo. But I did like Liev Schreiber's Sabretooth, despite the bad writing. Hugh Jackman is still Hugh Jackman. He's still amazing in his title role as Wolverine. We do get to see him in Weapon X, and we get to see him break out in a full sequence. And it is the best part of the movie. And that's where the positives end. Then you have crap CGI, you have effects that are cringe, and you have a story that makes no sense, and the way that it even tries to tie into the original X-Men movie, it is so forced. So yeah, it's brain rot, it's bad. But if I'm in the mood for a bad movie, when I want to just grab some friends and some drinks and just goof off, yeah, that's the movie I'm putting in. So, it's not like the most atrocious thing ever, but it is not good, and I will never defend it. It is trash, but it's not Shadow Realm because it's at least entertainingly bad. But then we're going to make a huge jump here, because now we're going to talk about the Wolverine and Logan. Wolverine first. Love it set in Japan. Love that it has a lot of really cool and unique ideas. And a lot of this movie does have some really great effects. Like, this is one of the first of the X-Men movies to be rated R. And this movie shows it. Like, oh man, this movie shows that rated R like a badge of honor. Sure, it's not as brutal as the next film we're going to talk about, but it is great. In fact, the story itself is great too, where we have Logan slowly dying because of adamantium poisoning, and having to go to Japan and defend this girl from a bunch of different people, including like this weird viper chick woman that barely does anything. Yeah, she sucks. The villains in this movie are what hold back this movie. If the villains were better, it'd be a 9 and be a little higher. But as it is, it's going right there. I think that The Wolverine's a great movie. However, none are even close to matching the dark, adult magnificence that is Logan. This is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. And the only movie on this list that I will say definitively is better than Endgame. Logan is everything that you want to be from the Old Man Logan storyline. It's Hugh Jackman in his original final performance as the character, as old, grizzled, and just uncensored as you could possibly want. He's caring for a dying Xavier, and the two of them end up coming across this girl, played by Daphne Keane, aka X-23, and they end up going on this road trip together, and it ends up being an exploration into Wolverine's grief, the darkness of his character, and ultimately his demise and what he's willing to sacrifice to save the lives of others, even despite being a grumpy old curmudgeon. And the gore in this movie too, just pure carnage candy heaven. Like, I freaking love Logan, dude. It is one of the best movies I have ever seen. And I still have the Blu-ray, and I watch it proudly. Even when I'm not in the mood for an X-Men movie, 9 times out of 10, I still pop in Logan. It is one of those movies that, yes, it can be depressing, yes, it can be a little hard to watch sometimes, but that's the point. The incredible directing from James Mangold, and without a doubt, Hugh Jackman's greatest performance as Wolverine. So, yep, it's at the top of the list, and it's the only movie that I will say is better than Avengers Endgame out of everything on this list. Then following after that, we have Deadpool, and I talked about these movies at length already in X months, so we're going to make this one quick as well. Those being Deadpool, Deadpool 2, and Deadpool and Wolverine. The first Deadpool is a nearly perfect movie. It is like it's a high 9.5. It is like right about there. The first Deadpool is a movie that took so many years to get made. But when it finally happened and everything came together, it was everything we had hoped for and then some. Ryan Reynolds is the perfect Deadpool. He is able to capture the snark, the explicitness, the horniness, and just everything you love about Deadpool. Not to mention they didn't sew his fucking mouth shut this time. Not to mention full rated R, extremely bloody and gory, and having some of the coolest action of the Fox Marvelverse up to this point. Like, the first Deadpool is an amazing movie that still stands the test of time today. Now as for Deadpool 2, it's a tiny bit step backwards, but I'm not going to call it bad. This movie is still great, in my opinion. But it's going to go, like, wait, why did I grab WandaVision? Go back down, and go back down where you belong. It's going, like, there. Yeah, it's going right there. Deadpool 2 is still a great sequel. It does a lot of things that the first Deadpool did well, but it does kind of falter a little bit in the story department, mainly because of Cable. Now, Josh Brolin's performance is still great, but something about the writing just didn't quite really work. Not to mention you have Juggernaut in there for no other reason than, well, he's Juggernaut. You have some weird character moments, and Deadpool doing death just to get back at Logan for Logan. Which, it's super freaking petty, but at the same time, it just kind of works. Like, Deadpool just works. You can't really explain it, but Deadpool 2, it is not better than the first. I do think the first is still funnier, but Deadpool 2 is still a great sequel, and it belongs up here in one of the funniest MCU movies. Speaking of MCU movies, now we get to the one that tied Sonic 3 for Best Movie of 2024 for a damn good reason. I absolutely fucking adore and love Deadpool and Wolverine. It is my number 5 new favorite in the entire MCU. When you include all the extra Elseworld stuff that connects into the MCU as official canon. Like, Deadpool and Wolverine is an amazing movie. Sure, it is pure fan service, but it does it in the best way. You have the TVA from Loki. You have a variant of Hugh Jackman, so it stays true and respectful to the death of Logan in Logan, aside from the opening sequence where Deadpool digs up his fucking corpse. And you have him going on this multiverse adventure with this newer Logan, and not to mention we finally get to see Hugh Jackman in the fucking yellow and blue suit, hell yes. And so much about it is just amazing. It is the first R-rated movie to make $1 billion for a damn good reason. Everything about Deadpool and Wolverine just works. From the fan service, to the story, to the characters, to the writing, to how much it crams in to just, like, 2.5 hours. It flies by, and it's also in the running for the funniest movie in the entire MCU. Like, this movie, I nonstop died laughing numerous times, and I've seen this movie at least 20 times by this point. Like, I adore this movie, and if it weren't for the fact that I have such a love for Spider-Man over Deadpool, it probably would be over No Way Home. But it is great, not to mention we finally get to see Channing Tatum as fucking Gambit, and he was awesome. And of course, Wesley Snipes' Blade coming back, and Elektra, and Daphne Keene's X-23. Like, it is pure fan service, but it's pure fan service in all the best ways. And I don't care if I get shit for it. I think Cassandra Nova is one of the best villains in the MCU. She's terrifying, she's scary, and she is so sick and twisted in the head. Not to mention, the gore is the highest it has ever been. It's even bloodier than the first Deadpool. And again, it's amazing how they found a way to make this movie while still staying respectful to Logan's death in Logan. Like, I adore this movie. It is one of the most rewatchable and hilarious movies in the MCU, and Deadpool could not have asked for a better entry into the MCU. It's the first R-rated movie in the MCU, and so far the only R-rated movie in the MCU that does not have Elseworlds attached to it. But it just gets better and funnier every single watch as you find more references. Like, you find multiple different versions of Logan, like the Calverine and one-handed Logan from Age of Apocalypse, and you have him recreating that one shot where he's nailed to that fucking X-cross on a giant pile of bones. Like, I could talk about this movie for hours. It is one of the most badass things I have watched in the past decade, and I will never ever stop loving it. Deadpool and Wolverine, one of the best movies in the entire MCU, and I will fucking die on the hill with pride. Okay, now we're getting down towards the final bits of it. So let's start with Agatha. Agatha is brain rot. I hated her in WandaVision, and giving her her own show was a terrible decision. Because she is a terrible character. She does not have me invested whatsoever. And not to mention, just like WandaVision, she's given the worst writing imaginable. So, it's not the worst MCU show, but I simply did not want to review it proper because I did not want to put myself through the suffering. Because this show sucks hard balls. Okay, moving on from that is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Yeah, you see how much of a Spider-Man bias there is here? I'm probably gonna get crap for this because a lot of people are pretty mixed on this show, but I personally really, really loved it. Not only as this new, different take on MCU Spider-Man, but just for being a darker and more adult version of this Spider-Man. Like, you don't have the help of Tony Stark. You don't have all that Stark technology. Like, you have Spider-Man as Spider-Man as you can get. And not to mention, like, the different costume changes, all the side characters are great, the voice acting is fucking outstanding. I love this show, dude. Like, I love the first season of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and I cannot freaking wait for Spider-Gwen in Season 2. Seriously, if you have not watched this show yet, watch it. It is definitely worth it. Don't let the race swap thing with the Osborns scare you away. This show is genuinely fantastic and one of the best Spidey shows we have gotten in a long time. Okay, what's next? Is it Brave New World or yes, it's Brave New World. Brave New World sucks balls. I already did a full review on this one, and it is going at the bottom of the 2 out of 10s, which is right about, I think, here, right? Because if I go back a bit to Silver Surfer, well, Silver Surfer's a 1. Okay, so Silver Surfer's a 1. There we go, right there. Brave New World's garbage. It's boring, it's terrible, it's rushed, it's a cash grab, and it is garbage. You want more thoughts? Go watch my 20-minute review of it, because I am not wasting any more breath on this piece of crap until the year-end worst list. Okay, all that's left now is the Marvel Netflix verse and Thunderbolts. So, let's fly through these ones nice and quick. Starting with Daredevil. Daredevil has 3 seasons, the original Netflix series. The first season is amazing. It does a great job setting everything up while also being a great story in of itself. Season 2 was a mess, but it was still a perfectly watchable, decent show. And, of course, the addition of Jon Bernthal's Punisher was by far the best thing it did. And then Daredevil Season 3 is one of the best seasons of television I've ever watched in my life. So, that means it averages out to, let's see, Season 1's a 9, Season 2 was a 6, and Season 3 is an 11. So, I think that's going to average out to probably around an 8 for Daredevil, but trust me, Daredevil's awesome, dude. So, it's probably going to go, like, at the top of the 8 out of 10s, which is right about here, I believe. No, these are 8.5s. It goes... Do I like it? I like it more than Loki, yeah. Daredevil goes right there. Daredevil is an awesome freaking show that you need to watch if you haven't already. Just be aware for the giant clusterfuck that is Season 2. Now for the ones that I actually haven't reviewed yet, outside of Born Again. We'll save that for last. Next is Punisher. This is one I do want to review eventually because I do think it is a very solid spin-off series of Daredevil. But it's not quite amazing. It does have a few flaws that do keep me from being able to call it great, but it is really, really good. Jon Bernthal's Punisher shines the way that he should. And even if the storytelling isn't always up to par, the action and his performance carries a big chunk of it. Like, Punisher is a really good show. Jessica Jones is also really good, and I do think it is a little better than Punisher. Simply because I think the characters are a lot better. Then Luke Cage. I think I gave Luke Cage, what, a 7? Yes? No, I gave Luke Cage a 6. Luke Cage is fine. It is good. It is watchable. It's decent. But it's not anything too amazing. So I'm going to put it... I'll put it here. It's above these guilty pleasure movies, but it's not above these two. It can go right there. Luke Cage is a perfectly solid movie. A perfectly solid show. Then you have Iron Fist, which can go right into brain rot. This one was a big disappointment. Like, it's a really impressive actor, but he was just not given the right material to work with. And then you had Defenders, which is just fine. I don't really feel like rewatching it again. Like, it should be really cool because it's like a crossover of all 4 of these characters, but something about it just fell off, and the way that it ends with Daredevil almost dying along with Elektra was really, really stupid. So, yep, Defenders is fine, but it's not really all that good, and you can definitely see that it is a clear sign that the Netflix verse was running out of steam. Then And there's Daredevil Born Again, one of my most anticipated shows of the year that unfortunately turned into a pretty big disappointment. Disney did neuter a lot of it despite the R rating, and while I do think that the show is still good, it is without a doubt the weakest season of all the Daredevils, so it's probably gonna go here. Because the great acting of Cox and D'Onofrio really does a lot to carry it, and I do think that it does have some intriguing plot lines going forward, and once we get season 2, which is bringing in Jessica Jones, maybe it will be able to rise up just a little bit if the next season's any better. Okay, we have been talking for a while now. For 2 hours. I actually thought it was going to be 3 or 4, but I guess I flew by these faster than I thought I would. So, Thunderbolts. This is the one that I just reviewed today. This is the one I just saw today. And this may or may not be a little bit of recency bias, but Thunderbolts is really good. I'm going to put it at the top of Assembled. It is a promising step forward for Phase 5 of the MCU. It is a return to what Marvel used to do best way back when they first started out. Simple, straightforward, to the point, grounded storytelling. Not super extravagant stuff, nothing like multiversal or any of that nonsense. Like, to the point where they put, like, a bit of grounded realism despite being a comic book movie. Not to mention, Yelena is amazing in here. They fixed John Walker's character, and they killed off Taskmaster. Thank you. Thank you for killing off Taskmaster. That was one of the worst mistakes that you made in the whole MCU. But it's held back by Valentina being a terrible villain that gets zero repercussions for her actions because she suddenly just reforms at the very end for no fucking reason whatsoever. And the whole thing with Bob/Century is very stupid and does not fit the grounded feel of this movie at all. But those two bad things aside, the rest of the movie is actually very entertaining. If you like the simple, grounded MCU movies, you'll like this one. Some people may or may not find it a bit tedious because it isn't like super extravagant, and if the box office is anything to go by, people are suffering through severe MCU burnout. But this one I definitely think is worth a watch. Give it a try if you haven't already, it might just surprise you. And with that, we are done. This is the full, final tier list. Holy crap, there's a lot here. So, let's go from worst all the way to best, shall we? So starting off at the worst of the worst. She-Hulk, Madam Web, Dark Phoenix, Fant4stic, Eternals, Thor Love and Blunder, Marvels, Morbius, Miss Marvel, Silver Surfer, Brave New World, New Mutants, Secret Invasion, Echo, Amazing Spider-Man 2, What If, and Captain Marvel. Those all belong in the Shadow Realm and they're all unwatchable pieces of crap. Then in Brain Rot, from worst to best, it goes Agatha, then Elektra, then Apocalypse, Black Widow, Dark World, Winter Soldier and Falcon and Winter Soldier, Groot, Wolverine, and Iron Fist. Then to watchable from worst to best, it goes WandaVision, Shang-Chi, Quantumania, Iron Man 2, Black Panther, Defenders, Blade Trinity, X-Men, The Last Stand, Fantastic Four, Luke Cage, Born Again, Venom 2, and Guardians 2. Then, at Assembled, is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., X-Men, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Daredevil, Iron Man 3, X2, X-Men United, Punisher, Jessica Jones, Hawkeye, Spider-Man 3, Incredible Hulk, and Thunderbolts. Then, in Marvelous, where most of these movies and projects actually ended up, is First Class, Agent Carter, Guardians Holiday, Venom, Venom 3, Loki, Netflix Daredevil, Doctor Strange 2, Wolverine, Ant-Man, Blade 2, Thor, Spider-Verse, Werewolf by Night, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Deadpool 2, Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 1, Guardians 3, Spider-Man Homecoming, Moon Knight, Across the Spider-Verse, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Yeah, there's a lot of Spider-Man. Can you see my bias here? Days of Future Past, Blade, Civil War, Deadpool, Spider-Man 1, and Thor Ragnarok. And then Iron Man, Far From Home, and Captain America, First Avenger. And then for my top 10 favorite movies in the entire MCU so far, 10 is Avengers, 9 Spider-Man 2, 8 is Age of Ultron, 7 is Wakanda Forever, 6 is Infinity War, 5 is Deadpool and Wolverine, 4 is Spider-Man No Way Home, 3 is Winter Soldier, 2 is Endgame, and 1 is Logan. And that is the list. That is everything in the MCU to date, ranked from worst to best. Holy crap, that was a very long tier list and a very long video. But, thank you guys so much for watching this big grand finale for Marvelous May. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on my list in the comments down below. Feel free to share your thoughts and opinions on any of these movies or on me and this being a live stream or whatever. Just share in the comments whatever you would like. And feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And now that we are done with Marvel for a while, now we are going to move on to, of course, SpongeBob and John Wick. So, yep, thank you guys so much for watching Marvelous May. We're probably going to do this tier list again when Fantastic Four First Steps comes out. But until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. So, take care, everyone. Stay Marvel.